Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to have a look at another collaboration beer. So this one is half English on the home side, half Danish on the away side. Both of the breweries involved here have featured on the channel before, albeit the Danish brewery has featured a little bit more frequently in recent times compared to the English brewery. I've had very good beers from both of them though regardless, and I'm very curious to see how this one turns out because I've heard very good things about previous iterations of this particular beer that we're going to try. So fingers crossed this makes for another interesting review. Hopefully it's a good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well then. So let's go for it. So for the English side of things then, we're going to head to a little place called Badley in Suffolk towards the southeast of England, and we're going to have a look then at another beer from Burnt Mill Brewery. This particular beer is called the Weight of Brunch. It is the bourbon barrel aged version coming in at 10% ABV, and this one is an imperial stout bourbon barrel aged with coffee added into it, and it's brewed in collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery finding their roots in Copenhagen over in Denmark. So yeah, very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. From what I gather, this is the third iteration of this beer. There was the original Weight of Brunch, and then there was a cognac barrel aged version, and now they have this one, the bourbon barrel aged version. That information came from my good friend Jake over at Jake Beers, who is very local to these guys. So I'll try to remember to put the link to his channel in the video description below, but if you want to see Burnt Mill beers reviewed a little bit more regularly than I do, then definitely check out Jake. He's got a really nice style. He just likes to say that he likes to be silly on YouTube, but I think it really works for him. I think his style of reviewing is really interesting. I do quite enjoy watching his videos, so make sure you check out his channel and show him a bit of love. One of his local breweries here, Burnt Mill Brewery. But yeah, as I say, very curious to see how this one turns out. As you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a massive fan of coffee stouts. Coffee beans are one of my favourite adjuncts that you can put in beer because they're just hugely complex, almost to the same level as hops, I would say. So yeah, my love of coffee stouts came off the back of a few interesting beers I had from Dugas Brewery in Landvetter over in Sweden actually. So yeah, very curious to see how this one turns out. I always like seeking out a very good coffee stout, and as I said earlier, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this beer as well then. So let's see how we go. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the breweries involved here before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery websites, the link to my other reviews that I've done, both from Burnt Mill Brewery and from Mikkeller, and you will no doubt see more added to both of those lists in the fairly near future, albeit more likely for Mikkeller. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the English beers that I've reviewed for you, and another one for all the Danish beers. This beer will appear in both of those, of course, because it is dual nationality. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Burnt Mill Brewery first off then, since these guys are the home brewery in this case. So Burnt Mill Brewery, as I've told you already, are based in Badley in Suffolk, which is to the northwest of Ipswich, down in a kind of southeastern area of England. But the brewery was founded by Charles O'Reilly, and they first started releasing their beers back in 2017. So Charles apparently discovered Sierra Nevada, and then after this started seeking out lots of different world beers, and he also spent a lot of time at Kernel and Brew by Numbers when he lived in London. Those are both in Bermondsey, of course, and two very good breweries that you should definitely check out if you get the chance. But he then got into homebrewing after this, and his first beer was a clone of the Kernel Double Citra, and he says that he's been learning about beer and brewing since around 2011. So Charles was apparently drawn to Badley by the fact that they could brew with grains produced on the local farms there, and they were also very close to their maltery of choice, which is Muntons as well. But over the years they've continued to build up the brewery, and the brewery currently boasts a 15 BBL brew kit and numerous different fermenters which are being added to all the time. But the current head brewer is Sophie Durand, who apparently was one of the founders of the International Women's Collaboration Brew Day, and she's also got a wealth of experience across the beer industry outside of that as well. But the artwork on the cans is designed by Josh Smith, and as of January 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, they've produced around 110 different kinds of beer so far. So yeah, they do some very good stuff. Like I say, my friend Jake over at Jake Beer he's done a number of different reviews from Burnt Mill, and I just review stuff from them whenever I can, because these guys are a very solid brewery in my opinion. So yeah, they seem to do a lot of collaborations with different Scandinavian breweries actually, which is quite interesting. In this particular cycle of reviews, you saw me review the Skog, which was a collaboration they did with Dugges Brewery from Gothenburg that I mentioned earlier. They were the ones who really got me in to these coffee stouts actually. But yeah, you know, try out some of the Burnt Mill stuff. I need to get a couple of their own beers, if that makes sense. So maybe I'll need to do a direct from brewery order next time. But I've been saying that about a lot of breweries. But the next time I'm home, I will see about ordering a few more beers from Burnt Mill, because I really like what these guys are doing. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Burnt Mill Brewery for the moment. Like I say, check out Jake's channel if you want to see more frequent reviews from them, but you can also check out the website that's down there. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's go on and have a look at the Danish side of things then. So on to Mikkeller. So Mikkeller, as I've told you many a time before, are the famous Danish gypsy brewery. They were founded back in 2006 by Christian Keller and Mikkel Bjergso, although they're now run exclusively by Bjergso, who used to be a physics and maths teacher. And the founders of Toul, of course, were former students of Mikkel Bjergso. But the name, of course, is just derived from, you know, Keller and Mikkel, so Mikkeller. And there you go. But again, these guys are very influenced by the whole American craft beer renaissance, and they basically started out as the homebrewing experimentations of Christian and Mikkel and grew from there. But for a long time they didn't have their own brewery, but they brewed at a variety of different host breweries. These guys were one of the original gypsy breweries, but they brewed in America, Norway, Scotland and Belgium, and a good chunk of their beer for a long period of time was brewed at the De Proef Brewery at Locriste Hifte, just near Ghent in Belgium. And I think they still brew quite a little bit of stuff down there actually. But their home base as such is the Mikkeller bar in Copenhagen, and they've also got a collaboration bar with Toll, who of course whose founders Tobias Emil Jensen and Tori Gainter, they were former students of Mikkel's when he was teaching in the gymnasium. But yeah, I think those two are probably the two original bars that you should go and visit. I am going to publish an out and about video very soon from the original Mikkeller bar on Victoria Gade near Sunde Boulevard in Copenhagen. So I would recommend you go there if you're going to have a look at what Copenhagen has to offer. Definitely a very, very nice city. But like I said, for a long time these guys operated as a gypsy brewery, but in April of 2016 they took over AleSmith's former brewery in San Diego after they moved on to a larger space. And then the following year in 2017 they announced that they were going to establish a second brewery in Citi Field, which is home of the New York Mets in New York City. So that's somewhere that I do need to go and visit when I get over there as well. Maybe do an out and about video at the New York Mets Stadium. That would be pretty damn cool. But they also have various locations in Copenhagen now. One of the main ones is Borboun, which is where they experiment with sour beers. They've got 12 oak fodders there, ranging from 3,000 to 7,000 litres, and various different California Chardonnay barrels and lots of other different types of barrels as well. But they've also got their War Pigs brew pub in the meatpacking district of the city, very close to the central station, and that's a collaboration with Three Floyds from Munster in Indiana, and that's another place that I would highly, highly recommend that you go. But for Borboun, the beers are brewed at War Pigs and then taken in a truck and a tank up to Borboun to be blended and aged and all of these kind of things. But they've got a lab in there where they can isolate new strains to create different house yeasts, and they've been doing that very, very successfully over the last couple of years. But there's a tap room up there as well, which has their own beers as well as other beers from different sour beer breweries around the world, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, Mikkeller Borboun is definitely a place that you need to check out, and you can check out my out and about video that I did there if you are particularly interested in that. But yeah, these days they've got various bars around the world. There's one in Barcelona, Madrid, Berlin, Warsaw, Bucharest, Stockholm, Tórshavn in the Faroe Islands, Tokyo in Japan, Seoul, Korea, Taipei and Taiwan, and they've also got one in Shanghai these days. But like I mentioned earlier, they've got various locations around Copenhagen. Ramen Tobiru, there's two of those stores that I would recommend you check out as well. War Pigs, and you know, various different Mikkeller bars, Brewed, and I think there's another one that I haven't managed to mention yet. But they've also got a few locations in San Diego, as well as 2 or 3 bars I think it is now in Bangkok. So yeah, I think they've actually got a bar in Singapore too, if I remember rightly these days. I think we didn't mention Singapore there. But yeah, lots of different Mikkeller locations across the world. They're a lovely, lovely little brewery, these guys. And yeah, definitely one of the breweries that you need to check out if you are particularly interested in Danish beer. The Danish craft beer, of course, is very, very strong these days. The Danish beer scene is great. And so yeah, Mikkeller, along with Evil Twin, and I guess Amar Broughus as well. I think it's fair to say that those guys were the kind of pioneers of the scene, if you like. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Mikkeller for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So, yeah, let's see how we get on with this one then. So I'll just like have a little look at the artwork in this beer before we open it up. There you can see the little Mikkeller guy just kind of popping his head out of the volcano, which looks as if it's just about to kind of erupt or something. But yeah, you can see at the top there is the Burnt Mill Brewery symbol. There is the Mikkeller symbol. That's the kind of one you see on Peter, Pale and Mary actually. But as we said earlier, this one is a 10% bourbon barrel-aged imperial stout with coffee. It says on the back here, in November of 2019 we welcomed Mikkeller to our brewery. Into a single tank we brewed, blended and fermented together both Beer Geek Brunch and our own Weight of Gold. Racked off into bourbon barrels where the beer has rested before being treated to a cold steep of natural processed coffee, pouring an inky black with a rich tan head. There are complex flavours of roasted malt, coffee and sweet molasses rounded out by the tannins and vanilla from the American oak. So yeah, canned on the 23rd of September 2020, and apparently it is best before the 23rd of September 2022. But when it's 10%, I would have thought you could age it a little bit more than that. I wonder if the seal on cans isn't quite as strong as if you put like wax tips on the bottles and things. I wonder if that's what it is, or maybe it reacts with the seal inside the can or something. I'm not quite sure. But yeah, should be quite interesting, this one. As you say on the back here, it's actually a former dairy that these guys are located inside. But yeah, 440ml can, this one. I did pay a little bit more for this because, you know, I really wanted a go at this beer. So yeah, I think I paid like £9 or something for this. So to translate that into different currencies, that's probably about €10, maybe 11 or so dollars American. And for those of you watching in Sweden, £9, maybe just about 100 kroners, roughly about 100 Swedish kroners. But this was a beer where I was just like, you know, bugger it, I want to try this one. Because the collaborations that Burnt Mill do with the Scandinavian breweries always tend to be very, very good. So yeah, 10% this one, the Weight of Brunch bourbon barrel aged version. I think this will be pretty awesome. So 440ml can, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very, very curious about this beer. So yeah, as I've told you in previous reviews before, I absolutely love coffee as an adjunct in beers. It's pretty much as complex as different hops. When it comes to coffee beans, you've just got a whole variety of different flavours that can depend on the country that it's grown. You know, you've got different mineral compositions in the soil, you've got different mineral compositions in the water, but from what I gather, the key variable when it comes to coffee is the MASL, the MASL, meters above sea level, at which the coffee is grown, because the higher you grow it, apparently, the more likely you are to get, you know, floral, aromatic and big fruity flavours and stuff like that out of it. So yeah, lots of different variety of kind of coffee beans that you can get there, and they'll give you loads of different flavours. So I love trying different coffee stouts. So if you are watching and you're a fan of coffee stouts as well, let me know some really nice ones in the video comment section below. But yeah, look at this. If I put the light through this beer, there's absolutely no tint on the edge of it. This one is black as night. This beer is as black as you're going to get. So yeah, when they say inky black, you know, they're not kidding. It's oil black, inky black, however you want to say. But as you can see, when we poured this beer, it had about between a quarter and a third finger of a frothy, I would say, you know, medium beige tan head. There's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. But as we said, this one's got a lovely dark, you know, inky black. I think we'll just use their descriptor. I think inky black colour to it. This one, there is no light coming through this at all. That's certainly into the black hole there, absolutely. So yeah, it certainly looks the part. I do want to try, hopefully at some stage I can try the Weight of Gold at some stage. So if that beer comes out in England, I might need to ask some of the English guys to start gathering stuff for me, and you know, keep that for when I return home. But yeah, I think this beer certainly looks the part of a coffee stout, a big 10% monster, of course. Not the strongest of coffee stouts we've had, right enough. We have had ones that are stronger than this, but yeah, it certainly looks the part, and I think this is perhaps the darkest stout that I might ever have come across on the channel in 2,600 reviews. But yeah, it certainly looks the part, this one. Let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see how we get on with this one. that does smell very, very nice. I have to admit, I would have been curious to try the cognac version of this as well, because cognac barrel aging is really, really interesting. So, yeah. Straight away with this one though, the bourbon barrel aging, really, that comes out of the aroma quite prominently here. So you can smell that lovely big kind of silky smooth oaky character underneath. You can smell that sort of infusion of those kind of brown sugary notes from bourbon. As I've told you in previous reviews, I always find that the American bourbons are distinctly more kind of sugary than the Scotch whiskies. The Scotch whiskies, of course, are a little bit more kind of toasty and things like that, whereas, you know, it's like everything. When the Americans get a hold of it, they make it a lot sweeter, basically. So yeah, when you have this one, you can smell that lovely kind of bourbon infusion, and the bourbon really, really is quite prominent in the aroma here. So it's the oaky wood forming the backbone. You do get quite a bit of vanilla out of this one, but then you get the nice kind of oily. You do get, it's quite an oily, but still at the same time slightly toasted bourbon brown sugar that you get out of this one. For me, those two notes really dominate the aroma of this beer. Actually, those are the big kind of big hitters in this one. Yeah, so for me, yeah, the coffee kind of takes a bit of a back seat. I mean, you can get some of the kind of coffee beans out of this one. It's quite a smooth coffee. There's a little bit of floral aromaticity to it and a wee bit of a red fruity character. You know, sometimes coffee can be citrusy, sometimes it can be really kind of grassy and very kind of spicy and floral at some points. But to me, the coffee in this, it's quite smooth. It's got a little bit of earthiness to it and just a little bit of red fruit. So yeah, it's quite the coffee for me is quite passive in the aroma actually. It does sit back, but I'm sure when we actually have a taste of the beer, we will be able to get more of that. But yeah, it's really, the aroma in this beer is dominated by those kind of, by the woody notes, by the big smooth oaky qualities, a little bit of the vanilla and a few of the other things too. So yeah, the aroma that comes out of this beer, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, it's not what I expected. I did expect something. This one isn't the most complex of big imperial stouts that I've come across, and I think that's just due to the dominance of the bourbon elements. But it certainly does. It's certainly a nice aroma, don't get me wrong on that, but it's just not quite as complex as I thought this one was going to be. But then again, I've not tried the Weight of Gold. As I say, I'd really want to get a hold of that beer at some stage, but I have had a few different versions of the Beer Geek Brunch, and that is, you know, an absolutely solid one in my mind. But yeah, the quality of this beer is, the aroma of this one I think is very, very nice, I have to say. So yeah, what else can we say about this one? It's just really, really nicely, it's really, really nicely executed for sure. But I think the more that you smell of this one, the more the vanilla comes out, the more the woodiness kind of rounds off a little bit, and it just starts to smell, you know, very, very smooth in this one. I really, really like how everything kind of comes together in this beer actually. So yeah, the malty side of this is very nice. The more you smell of this, you do start to get a sweeter caramel out of it as well. You can smell a little bit of a more kind of treacly molasses thing there, but I think the brown sugars are really dominated by the kind of bourbon aspect of the beer. There's a little bit of a nutty quality starts to come out of it as well, and you do get a good little bit of chocolate. I mean, for me, the chocolatey notes in this one, they come across quite smooth because of the vanilla and the woody elements to the beer. So yeah, maybe about a, I actually want to say the chocolate and this is a little bit more milky, so maybe about a 50% cocoa chocolate, 40 I would say normally, but there is just a wee touch of a kind of darker chocolate element in there. But yeah, the more that you smell of this beer, the more you get the kind of fruity notes, the red fruity notes coming out of the kind of coffee, and also I think from the chocolate as well. But yeah, there's not too much in the way of hoppy character to this beer. You can get a little hint of earthiness out of it, wee touch of floral aromaticity and a little bit of grassiness, but when it's barrel aged, you know, most of the hoppy character will have dropped away in this one. Apart from the fruits are there in abundance. Like I say, you can smell that some of the fruits, some of the most oily fruits out of the beer are coming from the coffee bean, and I guess a little bit from the kind of chocolatey side of it as well. But on the hoppy side of things, the fruits have got a lovely kind of brightness and oiliness to them. So there's a nice little bit of raisiny sharpness in there, absolutely. So there's a nice, as I say, a nice little bit of raisiny sharpness, a good little bit of yeah, raisiny sharpness in there. Some nice, as I say, a little bit of, there's a kind of juicy, kind of plummy note in there underneath, and you get some lighter kind of figgy qualities, but for me there's quite a big oily blackcurranty vibe coming out of this beer. But I mean, overall the aroma of this is very, very nice. As I say, not as madly complex as I thought it was going to be, a little bit more straight shooting, but it really is very, very heavy on the kind of bourbon barrel aging side of things. Actually, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Scotch ale that I had from Fierce Beer on New Year's Day. Actually, the bourbon barrel notes in this one are just very, very prominent actually. So yeah, take a little bit of time and just enjoy the aroma out of this beer before you get stuck into it, because I think it's quite an interesting one. And just for note, this beer does have barley malt, oats and wheat in it, so yeah, it should be quite an interesting one for sure. But yeah, take a bit of time and enjoy that aroma, as I said, but we are going to get stuck into this one now. So this one is the Weight of Brunch bourbon barrel aged version from Burnt Mill Brewery in Badley in Suffolk, down in the kind of southeast of England, brewed in collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery from Copenhagen in Denmark, with various places across the world. Let's get stuck into this. Slanja, skål, cheers. Yes, that's a lovely, lovely beer. First impression is that's different to pretty much every other coffee stout that springs to mind. Yeah, that's really, really nicely done, I have to say. So huge thumbs up to both Mikkeller and to Burnt Mill for this. This is one of the smoothest beers I think I've ever come across. Actually, one of the smooth and slickest beers I think I've ever found on the channel in 2,600 reviews. But it is very, very nice, that. So yeah, if you get the chance, if you come across this beer, have a go at it. And I'm just going to say, just on that first sip, I think that, you know, the slightly heftier price I paid for this one was worth it. You know, this is a treat beer, absolutely. And I'll be sharing this with my dad after I finish the review, right enough. But it's really, really nicely executed, absolutely. And I'll tell you something, it covers its alcohol very, very well as well. You could easily, it's not obviously so boozy, but as I say, at 10%, it's not the heaviest of imperial stouts you can get these days, but it's just really, really nicely executed for sure. But yeah, where to start with this one then? So it's actually, the flavour profile that you get off this beer is actually really similar to what you'd expect from the Aroma. So I mean, straight away with this one, you can feel that lovely big smooth oaky wood note that just blankets the middle of your tongue. So in that middle third of your palate, you've got that big oaty smooth, oaky and oaty smoothness in there as well. So yeah, let's try and build this up. So middle third of your palate, the kind of oaky smoothness there forms the basis of the beer. A little bit on the kind of front half of that kind of oaty thing there, that's when you get the kind of vanilla notes out of the wood, but you can feel that the oats are just kind of smoothing that out a little bit on top. So the beer has a really very slick base, but then it's just got a little bit of a slightly thicker smoothness sitting on top of that, with the vanilla flavours kind of infused into it. And that's a really, really interesting point about this beer. On top of that kind of oaty smoothness there, you've got a nice little bit of there's a little bit of coffee there, so there's like a very, very thin layer of coffee, but I think the coffee's prominent more further back. We'll come to that in a minute. But on top of that, though, you get that kind of oaty smoothness in there, as I say, but then you get a little thin layer of coffee, and then you start to get the chocolate in this one. There is a good level of chocolate to this beer, actually. So yeah, the coffee notes in the beer in this one come out further back, but the chocolate for me, I think I want to maybe say it's about 50% cocoa, maybe 60% cocoa that you get on top of that, and that sits just on top of that kind of oaty note that's in the beer, and in the very centre of your palate, I think that's when you start to get the kind of brown sugars out of this beer. I don't get so much in the way of like a treacle molasses note there. The brown sugars for me are more about the kind of bourbon. And it's interesting that the bourbon sugars don't sit a little bit further down in all those layers that I was talking about. It almost just feels like they kind of sit on the top. It's almost like the top of all those layers that I've just described to you is kind of glazed with like a bourbon kind of sauce or something like that. It really comes across in that way. Like the top of the palate in this beer, the very top layer feels like it's a kind of glazed. It feels like it's a sort of glazed yeah, it really just feels like quite a glazed kind of bourbon sugar sort of thing. It really kind of comes across like that. So the middle third of your palate in this beer, I think, is very, very interesting. Of course, as you go further into the aftertaste, if you go to the centre of your palate, then just kind of move forward a little bit, you do get some very nice, you do get a very nice kind of nutty quality coming out of the beer. I do like the little nutty edge that this beer has. So yeah, it's really nice how that goes together, to be honest with you. And as I say, you get some woody notes, just kind of, there's a few more kind of almost spicy woody notes. If you go to that front corner of your palate and then just go, you know, diagonally inwards, you get a few little kind of, you do get a few little kind of more spicy wood qualities coming out of the beer, which is interesting. So yeah, I really like how this one. I really like how this one goes together in that sense. So yeah, the quality the quality that comes out of this beer, I think, is just top class. I mean, the middle, that's one of the. It's a really interesting just array of different things you get out of this one, and that middle third of your palate, I think, is just really beautifully executed in this beer. So, you know, thumbs up to both Burnt Mill and Mikkeller for this one. But let's look at the back of the palate now. It's a coffee stout and we've not mentioned the coffee yet, so let's do that. So we've described the middle third of your palate. So if you go to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you do get a little bit of the more kind of black malty, roasty sort of thing in there. It's got a little bit of that kind of well-fired bread crusty sort of thing that you might, pardon me, expect of, say, you know, the Carafa malt from Weirmann in Bamberg in Germany. You've definitely got a little bit of that going on in this beer for sure. So yeah, nice kind of toasty, well-fired bread crust quality to this beer. But you've also, as I say, you also have a very nice, you can get the coffee just kind of sitting on top of that. But what I would say on the back third of your palate, underneath you do get a little bit of a toasty bread crusty sort of thing, but sitting on top of that, there's a slightly fluffier and kind of bigger wheaty aspect to this beer, which I really quite like. So yeah, you do have quite a nice big fluffy wheaty kind of thing coming out of this beer for sure, which I can really appreciate about this one, definitely. So I really like how that goes together in the beer, absolutely. So yeah, I think as I say, I really like how that goes together. So yeah, soft. Yeah, it's more like a kind of brown bready thing. So you've got the well-fired bread crust, then you've got a more kind of brown bready thing, and you can feel the slightly fluffier aspects of the wheat just kind of coming on top of that. But as I say, in that border region, the thickness on the back third of the palate is a little bit more than in the middle third of your palate, but the middle third is very layered. But yeah, as you go forward, you can feel that it's quite smooth, and then the thickness just drops away. But the coffee, I think, really comes out. The coffee kind of sits on top. It sits in that, just sitting over that back half of the middle third of your palate. You can feel the kind of coffee notes just sitting in there. I think the coffee does take a bit of a back seat in this one compared to other components of the flavour. But yeah, the coffee for me I think it really does take a little bit of a back seat in this one, to be honest with you. I would have been curious to try the original version of this and also the cognac version, because the cognac barrel aging is fascinating. It's really, really interesting because it just gives you, it's not something you come across madly often, to be honest. But what would you say, the coffee in this one is really nice. I mean, it's quite a smooth and earthy coffee in my mind. There is a little bit of aromaticity to it, but it has quite a wee bit of red fruit. You can feel that there's a few kind of plummy sort of elements to the coffee in there as well. But that coffee just kind of sits on top of that border region, like I said, and it goes into the back third a little bit and into the middle third of your palate a wee bit too. So I really like how that kind of goes together. So yeah, it's just interesting how that works actually. So the coffee, I think, does take a little bit of a back seat in this, but it certainly lets you know it's there. The focus, I think, is on the other aspects of the beer. So yeah, they say it's a stout with coffee. It's not a coffee stout, so I can maybe see why they've kind of decided to say it in that sense, if you like. But yeah, to be honest with you, I think that description covers the middle and back thirds of your palate quite well. That covers the you know, the barrel aging, it covers the wood, it covers the kind of malty side of the beer very nicely actually. So yeah, everything I think goes together really nicely in this one. So big thumbs up to both the breweries involved here with this one. They've pulled off a solid beer. The hardest thing to get right in these is the malt base, and they've certainly managed to pull that off quite well. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. So in the back corners of the palate, you definitely have a nice little bit of earthiness to this one. It does have a little bit of a kind of roasty character there, but as you move further forward, it does have a wee touch of herbalness, but the earthiness spreads a little bit further forward. And then on the front corners of the palate, you get some really nice kind of floral aromaticity out of the beer. So on the front corners of the palate, it's got a nice little bit of floral aromatic quality. Then round the very front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of a lighter kind of grassy sort of thing too. So yeah, you've got a really nice little bit of green side of the hop there. And I guess as you age this beer a little bit more of that will drop away. But I think if it's brewed in November 2019, it's probably been in the barrels since maybe January of 2020. So it will have been in the barrels for a good kind of 9 months before it was released. I'm not sure exactly when the cognac version of this would have been released or the original one, but yeah, it's I think this beer has been aged somewhere in the region of 9 months, because it was canned on the 23rd of September. So yeah, it's been bourbon barrel aged for about 9 months, something like that. But yeah, the hoppy side of the beer does show up a little bit, which I think is quite nice. You do get that little bit of floral aromaticity there, then a bit of a grassiness around the front curve of the tongue. But of course, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy, fruity esters kind of come out of the beer. The kind of chocolate malts and the the chocolate malts, to a degree, the barrel aging and the coffee are all going to contribute to this as well. So let's focus on this. So yeah, when you take this beer in, it's actually got a really nice, there's a bit of a juicy kind of plummy note to it, but at the same time there's almost like a kind of more sultana type vibe to this beer, which is quite interesting. For me, it's like there's a little bit of that juicy plum, but then mainly it's kind of sultanas, if you like. But the underneath of that front third of your palate, it has got a little bit of that kind of, it's got a little bit of the kind of bourbon sugary sort of thing, that kind of bourbon, that brown sugary element of the bourbon. That's kind of what sits underneath the front third of your palate there. So I really like how that side of the beer all comes together. I think it's very nice, to be honest with you. So it gets a big thumbs up from me in that regard. I very much like how everything comes across in this beer for sure. But on the fruity side of things, in that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, it's got a little bit of an almost cakey quality to it, like like the edge of a well-fired kind of brownie as it comes off the bacon tray. You've got a little bit of that there. But then yeah, as you move into the front third of your tongue, you get a juicy plummy note in there. There's a wee bit of a sharper raisiny note, but then as you move further forward, it really becomes really kind of sultana like actually. And as you reach the very front part of that kind of tip of your tongue, it does have a little bit more of an oily presence to it. There's a little bit of blackcurrant in there, but for me, as you go further into the aftertaste, it's a more blackberry, it's a more kind of rounded and oily blackberry that you get out of this one. So yeah, I really appreciate that about this beer for sure. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer for me is very nice. It gets a big thumbs up from me, absolutely. I didn't expect it to be so kind of sultana leaning. It really reminds me of the kind of more dried white green grapey sort of flavours rather than the kind of red grapey ones. But yeah, juicy plums, sultanas, then a bit of blackcurrant and more rounded blackberry the further that you go into the aftertaste, and the sort of bourbony sugars are just kind of sitting underneath that. But yeah, the flavour profile of this one is very interesting, and it's taken me a little bit of time to kind of cover that with you. So this will be a slightly longer review, but you know, the good beers always tend to just be a little bit longer in the review time. So yeah, let's just leave it at that for the flavour section just now. I think we've described it really in depth, but it's a beautiful beer, this one. The coffee does take a back seat though, so it is more of a kind of bourbon barrel aged stout this than a coffee stout, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's have a little look. Let's have a little look at the how would you say? Let's have a little look at the mouthfeel of this one then. So I would describe this beer as being at the kind of bottom end of full-bodied. The carbonation is very smooth on this one. It's a very slick beer, this, and quite often you'll find that with barrel-aged ones. They do tend to come across as very, pardon me, very kind of slick. But yeah, it's got a very nice kind of softness to it, this one. A really kind of slick, oily type beer actually. So yeah, I really like how how all of this goes together. But yeah, the slickness of this beer is spot on actually. But yeah, on the malty side of things and the barrel aging side, it's as again very, very smooth. You get a good degree of sweetness out of this beer. The coffee, I think, just adds a little bit of bitterness, and there is a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty note, I think, on the back third of your palate. But overall, the malt base in this beer is quite smooth, and it starts to lean towards the kind of sweeter side of things the further that you go into the aftertaste with it. So yeah, the flavour profile of this beer, I think, is pretty spot on actually. But yeah, the malty and middle third of your palate is the middle third of your palate is where all these layers are, but it's beautifully executed. As I've said a few times, it's just a beautifully done beer. So yeah, in terms of the hoppy side of things and the bitterness, there's not a lot of bitterness to this beer. I think it's maybe about 30 or maybe that's a bit too low, maybe 40 or 50 IBUs. You do still get a little bit of the hop coming out of this one, but it's not an overly bitter beer. The oats and the wheat are really kind of smoothing this one out, and that's probably what's given it a lot of its slickness. But yeah, a little bit of bitterness to this beer, maybe 40 or 50 IBUs, like I said, and lovely big kind of oily, fruity characters in there as well. So the yeah, the whole, all the site, the kind of everything that goes together in this beer just works together really well. Lovely big oily fruits, big, smooth and slightly sweet, but also very slightly roasty, malty, and barrel aging side 3, and just a little bit of hoppy bitterness. So yeah, big thumbs up to big thumbs up to both Mikkeller and to Burnt Mill for this one. They've pulled off an awesome beer here. Most surprising thing would definitely be the Sultana flavours, which I didn't expect, but yeah, I really like that about it too. But yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are, both from Burnt Mill Brewery and from Mikkeller. We will no doubt return to both of these breweries in the fairly near future, but I do hope that I can get a hold of the Weight of Gold from Burnt Mill and have a taste of that on its own. I think that could be really interesting, so I will be keeping an eye out for that beer, and fingers crossed that's the next one that you see from Burnt Mill. But yeah, this one was the Weight of Brunch bourbon barrel aged version, 10% imperial coffee stout, I guess we could say, or imperial stout, bourbon barrel aged with coffee, probably more accurately, from Burnt Mill Brewery in Badley in Suffolk in England, in collaboration with Mikkeller, the famous Danish gypsy brewery from Copenhagen, Denmark. Thanks again for watching. Check out my social media, check out both of these breweries, and I will catch you guys very soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll catch you guys on the next review.